If everybody's settled in, my name is Verkaik. I'm from the Center for Philanthropic Studies at the University of Amsterdam. And the paper I'll be presenting is actually very similar to the one that Mary is presenting in the experimental design. And I'm very happy already shed some light on the definitions of output and impact information, so I can skip by all of that. The title is actually somewhat different from what you've all read in the program book. So I hope you didn't base your decision on that. It's pretty much the same paper. It's just another experiment added. All right. First of all, I want to shed some light on the imperative of impact information. So there's these huge differences between the impact per dollar between interventions and between charities. There's this recent movement you might have heard of, the effective altruism movement, who've been pointing out that it's important that charities evaluate their impact, make sure that they choose for the most effective interventions, and that donors do so as well. So you could all be multiplying the amount of good you do by choosing for organizations that evaluate their programs, make sure they choose for the most effective programs there are around. And these differences, just to illustrate, are really large. So let's say we want to promote school attendance in Africa, which we could do in 3 ways. We could provide the families with cash if their kids go to school, because oftentimes the kids have to stay at home because otherwise the family can't eat and they have to work on the land or earn money. So you could just give them cash and they would go to school. We could give them free uniforms, or we could deworm them, because many of these kids get sick a lot of the times because they play in dirty water or eat uncooked food. So we wanted to, there was some evaluations on how many school years were provided for every $1,000 spent on these programs. And these differences are tremendous, right? If you imagine the amount of money going into these programs, seeing the multitude of kids that would have been able to go to school if they would have been chosen for the deworming program instead of the cash for school attendance, I mean, that would have multiplied the good that's been done tremendously. And this applies to different areas as well. So these are health interventions summarized by Ort, 103 different interventions. And he actually calculated that the median intervention was, compared to the most effective interventions, the most effective interventions were 60 times as much effective as the median intervention. And these differences become incredible once you compare them to bad or less good interventions. I wanted to know, do donors really care about this? Do donors want to make sure that their gift is actually have an impact? And also, many charities are currently provided with this evaluation aversive incentive because donors want them to suppress costs. But evaluating and making sure you choose the right programs costs money. You need staff for that. So I wanted to see, maybe there's an incentive in evaluating and providing that impact information. Maybe donors reward that. So that was really the starting point for my study. So what did we do? We conducted 2 online experiments on Amazon Mechanical Turk. In case you don't know what that is, it's this platform by Amazon in which you can pay workers to make tasks such as filling out surveys, which is incredibly cheap and incredibly fast. The experiments are around 500 to 700 participants, which fill up in an hour or 2. And we showed them a UNICEF meal, so it actually taps into some of the questions that were just pointed out. We gave them output and impact information, and in the case of impact information, we provided them with output and impact information. And we measured responses to generosity, which we measured in 2 different ways. We asked them, if you were at home and you received this letter, would you donate, yes or no, and how much would you donate? And then we said, all right, you've worked very hard on this project. We want to reward you. Here is some lottery dollars. There's a chance this decision is actually going to be implemented. Would you like to give away the money, or would you like to keep it? Just to get we didn't have budget to give everybody real money, but this way we wanted to make it as similar as possible and give them a feeling of having to earn the money, because we know that house money is often given away more generously than money that they feel they've earned. And we investigated the mediator of perceived pro-social impact, which is feeling like your gift is actually making a difference. There's been some critics on using single evaluations because the imperative of impact is mainly choosing between charities instead of donating yes or no. But I chose for a single evaluation context because most donations are made in response to a solicitation. The donors that do seek out comparisons between organizations are already those that are highly motivated for rewarding impact. So this is this was an actual Dutch fundraising letter, which we translated to English because we used American respondents, and we manipulated the part right here. And in the control group, I'm not sure if this is readable, but it says, "Only with your help we can prevent Angabella," which is the kid that's specified in the message, "and thousands of other children dying from malaria." Then in the output group, they also saw, "You can give a long-lasting insecticide-treated bed net for every $3 you donate." So you know what output you have. With your nets, you protect the children against malaria during the night, which is when most infections are incurred. And in the impact group, they also saw, "Your bed nets are a highly effective way of combating malaria. Independent evaluations have shown that your bed nets will significantly increase the chances of the child making it to the age of 5 by doubling the likelihood of him or her offending of malaria." So as I said, we did 2 studies, and in the first study we used more statistical information on the actual percentages of the increase and the decrease in child death rates and malaria, which actually worked better, contrary to my own expectations. So output information, what do we know? Well, we had strong belief that this would make a difference in generosity, because we know that making a difference is something that people often say matters when making a donation decision or not. And this is especially true when donating to international aid, because the programs, the problems you're fighting in international aid are often much larger, so it's less clear how you're making a dent in the actual problem. And the use of the money is oftentimes more ambiguous. This belief that a gift will make a difference is what we call the perceived pro-social impact. So donors are very strongly aversive to this feeling of your gift just being a drop in the bucket. But there's some ways that you can counteract that feeling. So you can show donors how a donation helps. Shelton and Rogers showed footage of a Greenpeace program, which showed how anti-whaling programs were actually saving whales, compared to just showing the anti-whaling program and what they would do. Then there's the proportion dominance effect, which shows that people prefer to save larger proportions of a group. So in this case, although the absolute number of life saves is equal, people strongly prefer to save 2 lives of a smaller group. And also, if you ask them how many people would this intervention need to save to be worth $50,000 or name an amount, then the larger group would always need to save a larger amount of people, and compared to the smaller group, because people want to feel that their gift is making a difference. This is also an explanation for the identifiable victim effect, that we prefer to give to identified victims. And then there's this recent term which has been coined the identified intervention effect, which says if you make specific how the donation is used on a specific project, this increases the perceived pro-social impact as well, thereby increases generosity, and Acton and al. Found that this increases happiness from giving. Impact information, however, we know very little about what that does to generosity. There's been some, Metzger and Gunther had a very interesting experiment, I think, in which they investigated to what extent donors wanted to buy information before making a donation decision. And they compared demand for overhead information to recipient type information, child's or not, and impact information. And actually the demand for impact information was the lowest and very low on its own. It's been found that a lot of statistical information decreases emotional response, which is often something that makes people give. And then there's this evaluability bias, which is, I think, also very interesting, which says, well, people respond very strongly to overhead because it's more easy to evaluate. It's a percentage, so it's more easy to say, oh, this is bad and this is good. Well, impact information, it's very hard to evaluate whether impact is good or impact is bad if you just hear about one organization, what its impact is. Is 50% decrease in contracting malaria, is that good or is that a bad program? You don't know. And this becomes easier when you compare between different organizations, which is what they found. And then there's some small or heterogeneous effects. For example, Carlin and Wood found that only donors who have previously invested a lot of money in charities respond to impact information, while those that have only given small amounts before did not. So the results. The first experiment used 450 participants, and in the hypothetical donation, so what would you do at home, we saw that output information increased generosity, and we see this additional increase of impact information, but the additional increase of impact information on top of output information never reaches significance. So there's this additional effect, but it's not significant. And in the lottery dollar donation decision, the output information additional effect wasn't significant either, but including output and impact information was significantly higher than in the control group. Oh, and so bear in mind, this is a between subjects design. So 3 groups, one saw only the control letter, one saw only that with the output information, and one saw that with output and impact information. And what we see is that it's mainly the likelihood of donating affected. So mainly people starting to donate once they receive that information, and not so much that they're going to give higher amounts. This is a lot of numbers, but what it says really is that the effect is mediated by the feeling of donors having a difference, making a difference. This is a figure from the second study with 600 participants, and the perceived social impact explains about half or more than half of the effect of output information on generosity. And we also looked at whether it might have been confidence in UNICEF or in the project that they're going to give to, but this was not a mediator. And impact information, well, seems to be mediated by the same perceived social impact, but again, no significant results. So I had the results from study 1, and then I figured, all right, why are they not responding to impact information? They might be because they just don't know how important it is or how big the differences are. Then I read Collins and Wood's paper again, and they suggested that it might have something to do with dual process theory, that donors who previously invested large amounts in charity are more committed to the charity and will read the mailing a lot better, more deliberately, looking at, hey, is my money being well spent? Do I want to donate again? It's more of a strategic donation decision compared to casual donors who just give money based on emotional responses. I looked at priming participants into a deliberative decision-making mode. So having them solve a set of math problems has been shown to increase the extent to which they make deliberate decisions. And we know from deliberate decision makers that they're less responsive to emotional appeals, they're more focused on the consequences of their choices, they're more focused on quality of arguments, so they actually read the quality of the arguments better. In this experiment, the not deliberate decision makers actually focus more on celebrity status in the narrator of a message, and they're more inclined to use logic when making donation decisions. So we figured, well, this might affect the extent to which impact information affects generosity. So we had some control questions on the prime, and we saw that those who had solved the math problems did not use more logic when making a donation decision in a control question, did not better recall factual information from the donation decision, and weren't more generous when faced with impact information. So the prime didn't really do anything, it seemed. In fact, it actually seemed to be somewhat of a cognitive overload or saturation effect, because they were actually worse at remembering information from the letter. Yeah, so then we looked at education, and we made a distinction between participants who attained their bachelor's degree or not, and those that didn't. And we see that only among the higher educated, those that receiving the math prime donated more, while those that did not receive the math prime did not. And I actually got a lot of complaint mails about the math problems being impossible to solve. You can't do this, and there's this, you have to set this time limit on Amazon. And they were like, how can you do this? You pay me for 10 minutes. I can't do that in 10 minutes. So I apologized and I used PayPal to transfer some more. It's like 50 cents a participant, so it's nothing really. But then maybe, I mean, the higher educated might have just been more able to solve these math problems, and that's why it worked for them. But then I started looking at the heterogeneity of the effect as a whole, and I see that higher educated respondents do respond to output and impact information, while lower educated respondents do not, or at least not significantly so. So there's this heterogeneity in effect. Let's see, this is the graph, so you can see the tendency is the same, but the differences are higher for higher educated respondents. Alright, so implications. Donors care about knowing how their money is spent and how it makes a difference. They only somewhat care about the actual impact of the donation. I already touched on some of the reasons why. Might not know why it's important, might decrease emotional responses. I don't know. Higher educated respondents did care, while lower educated respondents did not do so significantly. I wanted to touch on some of the implications for charity. So apparently what you see in many fundraising practices is that a lot of charities, they really stress the size of the problem, so they try to give a sense of urgency. But this might counteract generosity actually, because if you stress the size of the problem so much, donors might not feel that they're making a difference, and might counteract that feeling of generosity. So I would say stress how a gift is making a difference in concrete lives of recipients. And also, I think there's some incentive in my results for charities to evaluate and communicate their impact, because although the effects are not significant, we're looking at 10 to 20% increases when giving impact information. Although we're not more than 95% sure that it's 10 to 20%. Some of the limitations, of course, it's an online experiment without real donation decisions, no real money. The prime didn't seem to work, and I report a mediation effect, but there's some evidence on self-justification. So it could be that output information leads people to donate, and oftentimes people that don't donate, they tell themselves, my gift wouldn't have made a difference anyway. That's actually the title of the paper, and people that do donate tell themselves that the gift would have makes a difference. So it could be a reverse causal effect. Now, some future directions, which Marius already discussed. A field experiment would be really good. I would like to see if impact information affects emotions. We need a successful prime for deliberate decision making. And what I find really interesting is to see a threshold value of impact investigated. So whether it could be that donors have a expectation of a certain impact, and if it falls below that threshold, they would actually negatively respond to impact, punishing organizations evaluating their impact information. But you still have more to learn about the best format of presenting impact information, and it would be interesting to see if impact information makes any sense. Some of the charities, for example, Oxfam does advocacy work, which is also very hard to evaluate, I guess, but it would be good to see if impact information still has its effect if output information is excluded. Thank you. All the paper and materials are available on Open Science if you're interested. Thank you.
Well, any questions? Comments? Yes.
Really cool presentation, thank you very much. Very interesting also for some of the stuff we do.
Thank you.
Similar to the question I had for Marius, I was just curious if you did any manipulation checks to see if they perceive the information as different. Because I think that's still a debate, right? If donors really see the difference between outcome, output, and impact.
Yeah, so I didn't actually check whether they perceived the difference, but I asked them, does your gift make a difference? And it was higher for output information or output and impact information compared to the control group. So there's something happening cognitively in their feeling of making a difference, because otherwise I wouldn't have found a mediation effect.
Hi. Thank you very much. It was a really great presentation. I'm just interested in your use of Mechanical Turk, because I understand, I know you said they were all American.
Yeah.
My understanding of the people who reply to that is that they tend to be in a certain group, tend to be students or highly educated. So did you make any allowances for that situation?
I compared the sample to the census mean, and they're younger, higher educated, lower income, less religious.
Is this the Mechanical Turk people?
Mechanical Turk people. There's been some studies that investigated the representability, I guess, of the results.
Yes.
They're more representable than the effects are more comparable to the population compared to student samples.
Yes, that's
But of course, I agree fully. It's not perfect. I also checked some recall questions and whether they made the survey deliberately or carefully. And they actually take a lot of time reading the letter, recall most of the information. So because that was a concern as well, they might just be earning money, speeding through the survey, but that wasn't much of an issue, it seems.
Yes.
Do you think that the fact that there wasn't much difference between just giving output and impact, impact wasn't that much of a difference because it was UNICEF? Because what I feel is that everybody knows UNICEF does good, so UNICEF has impact. So whether that was, because I would say a completely unknown nonprofit might not.
Yeah. No, I agree. I actually measured the so in the control group, I measured the confidence in UNICEF, and there's somewhat of a ceiling effect. So everybody, even in the control group without outputting impact information, people think UNICEF makes a difference. They have confidence in UNICEF. It's a trusted organization. There's a paper though by ACNIN, which is also cited in the presentation, and they compared nothing but nets to UNICEF, and which make the impact very specific. They provide malaria nets as well, and they do see a difference in the impact just comparing a fundraising letter by UNICEF to one by nothing but nets. So, but yeah, it's a fair point.
Why was again, that's also for the earlier question, is that you chose not to have a brand and you chose to have a brand. What is the reasoning behind choosing the brand? And
yeah, just real world applicability. I could have of course used a fictitious example, and also I wanted to do a field experiment. So I made a deal with UNICEF that I would test it online. If it worked, that we could take it to the field, which we did. But then the mailing was sent out at the same day of the Nepalese earthquake, and I had like 20 donations to analyze. So it didn't really work. So yeah, that's too bad.
so do you plan to do something without brand?
No, actually, I've the two experiments the paper's finished. So, but it might be good, and I still want to do if there's ever a chance, I want to do a field experiment. But using a real world example seems to be hard because I've been going by a lot of Dutch organizations. It might be because I speak to the fundraising branch, and they're like separate silos compared to the M&E measurement and evaluation team. But they often don't really have information on the impact level available to use in fundraising messages.
Any other question? Yes.
It's just a comment. Hi, it's just a comment really. I wonder, your work seems to have shown really clearly, as did the previous speaker, that there are categories of people for whom, of potential donors for whom effectiveness information makes a difference, and categories for whom it doesn't. I, as a practitioner, have spent many years actually trying to develop a small, locally based organisation in which our mantra was people give to people, and actually the thing that worked was putting the right person down in front of a potential donor, and very often what we were actually trying to sell, if you like, was completely irrelevant. And I've actually sat in a room where someone's written a check for $50,000 on the basis of, I don't really care what you're doing, but yeah. I play golf with the guy who's just asked me, so it's clearly that you've got a young, perhaps more technocratic, more educated group of people who are going to respond to this. I just wonder whether either yourself or others in the room see a danger of donor bodies as a whole becoming a bit fixated on impact information in relation to reporting from the NGOs that they fund, and whether actually a whole lot of energy might be completely wasted by those organisations trying to procure information in a format that actually won't take their cause that much further.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the effect size of the results are nothing near to the identifiable victim effect. Yeah. So yeah, good point. But I mean, you might be able to do both, of course. And I think for charities, evaluating and measuring impact is important on its own, not only for donors. I mean, so.
Quick response as well. What would be bad about if this person would not just give out £50,000 or euros, but asking what he actually gets for it? But to me, this sounds like a reasonable. You say if they become the focus is too much on impact, but in a way, I feel the generosity is great, but why not look at the most effective organization to solve a certain problem? Are we talking about financing nonprofits or solving problems? And if we talk about solving problems, I think looking for the impact is a good thing on the donor side.
I want to answer his question because it worried me. what we see in the Charity Navigator ratings is a considerable adverse incentive. People push their overhead expenses down in order to push their
I'm not talking about overhead. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
but the same thing could happen in the impact world, that people become obsessed with finding the one with the most stars and stop, in another sense, stop paying attention to what is really going on.
Right. I don't want to get into the whole overhead discussion. I'm quite with you saying overhead is not a good figure to
I wasn't
look
trying.
at
I was using that as a
reference point.
reference point. I'm worried about competition for the biggest number of stars in impact ratings, and distorting both the performance of the organizations and the marketplace.
Yeah, that's what
I think, yeah, I totally agree. What you always have to bear in mind is what I already said is it worth the cost, right? Measuring the whole impact in the first place. For some organizations, it doesn't really make sense to measure it in the first place. You're going to spend half the budget just measuring the impact, and that's not really helpful as well. So I agree on this.
The two last
Oh,
questions.
thank you. Oh, sorry, again, just sort of follows on from what you said. It was just interesting, I thought, that both of you, Marius and Davey, both chosen the type of charity that is something that deals with poverty and third world development, that sort of thing. And I was wondering, and you probably haven't got an answer, but I just thought it might be interesting to look at, okay, what about impact when you're donating to, say, an arts area, you know, ballet or opera or something
I agree.
like that that's different.
I mean, I chose this example because the imperative is larger. I mean, you're saving 20 lives or 100 lives,
Yes.
and of course, maybe arts is you're educating more or less. So I mean,
Saving lives.
but I don't. I think the effect sizes will be larger for charities in international aid because, as I said, spending is more ambiguous. Problems are larger. It's more ambiguous whether you're actually making a difference or not.
And this fieldwood, or even the potential with the donors' relationship, might have more of an impact when it's the arts or education or something that they've got an emotional tie to.
Yeah.
You know, I love going to the opera, or I went to that university, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry.
You?
Thank you.
Yes, thanks Dave for your presentation. I'm Barry Holder from Vrije University in Amsterdam. I'm a colleague of Dave. I was just wondering, it's also related to Marius' presentation, that the content of the impact information, do you have any idea of that is a variable that influences the outcome of the result? So it's just so not only about presenting output, outcome, and impact, but also
There's been papers that have argued that for example, impact information should be presented as some sort of a ratio. I think it's very important to see how what value of impact people is below or above their expectation and how it should be presented. I think that's a very good question and really an open question that's a gap that needs to be filled.
but we have to finish. Thank you.
Thank you.